much is it a box? Look in the back. I don't think it's no more back there.
You who dwell in the shelter of the Lord, who abide in his shadow for life, say to the Lord, my refuge, my rock, in whom I trust, and he will raise you up. Let's jump ahead, shall we? The snare, let's see how to get out of that hand. Line 2? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yum.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here today for this celebration of Barry Pearson's life. My name is Blair Moorhead. I am a friend of Amy's, and I'm an associate pastor at Emmanuel Presbyterian Church in McLean. All of you here today were big parts of Barry's life. This is a time today to remember all those parts of his life and to share stories together. And in that celebration of Barry's life, we hope you will also find comfort. This is a space to bring your full self, everything you are feeling, that we may all share in community and uphold one another. And to do that, we will start with a poem from Barry's friend Peter.
About right. If death, then grief, right? Well, yes, but also relief, release. And love that goes past death, that keeps the connections so many think death severs. And then, of course, there's joy, because what we're after is the fact of resurrection, that what the heart longs for, the poem accomplishes. Praise that lifts up the body of the beloved. That wasn't a grave, but a door that closed and is now open, opening into a poem.
I love that line, well, yes, but also. Our poem that Peter just read points to our task today. To grieve, well, yes, but also. One of the gifts of holding this service now in May, on Barry's birthday actually, after he passed away in January, is that all of y'all gathered today are in different stages of grief. Amy and Greg mentioned this in particular. They were thinking about that. Grief has lived in your hearts and bones, and it has been fierce. It has also had moments of cooling in these past few months, and then sometimes those sneaky returns. Maybe returns when you saw that bird that you hadn't seen since before the winter, or when you started planning a trip and you thought of voyages taken with Barry, or when you turned on Ouida and heard that familiar classical piece. And maybe it wasn't just grief that snuck up on you. Maybe you felt a whole bunch of things. As our poem says, maybe you felt the release, the relief, the love, or the joy. Barry's people today know that you can feel anything that you feel. Let the grief come if today is its day. This is a great place to do that. Let the laughter come as you share stories later. Let the grief and joy and love mix together. That's one of the tasks of this gathering today. Y'all, I just mentioned 2 tasks. Maybe you didn't know you were coming for homework, but y'all have tasks. Don't be afraid, this is your task, to feel more than one thing today. To grieve, well, yes, but also. I come from a tradition that says that death is not the final word. I know a lot of us here today do. Barry had roots in such a tradition as well. And in my tradition, we look to Jesus and understand the story of his resurrection as a way to say that death is not the end. That, as the poem says, it wasn't a grave, but a door that closed and is now open. That grace abounds in this physical life and beyond. In my tradition, we say that nothing can separate us from the love of God, neither death nor life. As one translation of the book of Romans 8 puts it, neither our fears for today nor our worries for tomorrow can separate us. Indeed, nothing in all creation will ever be able to separate us from the love of God. And if that is not your tradition, we gather here today as witnesses that nothing can separate us from love, period. Not even grief. And I'll say especially not grief, because grief is deep evidence of the presence of love, of the impact Barry had on your life. Grief doesn't happen unless there's love. And this love, the love that brought you here, does work even after death. It shows us that death does not have the final word. It lingers, it stays, it is here right now. It points to the possibility of resurrection, of love that goes past death. It's love that reminds us that resurrection is indeed possible. And you might close your eyes now, take a breath, and think of a resurrection moment. Maybe a sign appearing on this beautiful spring day, maybe the light through the window, the peonies coming out, the green canopy of trees, and maybe especially today, the song of a bird. All these remind us that death is not the final word, that even a dormant winter world resurrects into spring. And even remembering resurrection in its many forms, putting one foot in front of the other, even with that hope of resurrection, can be challenging. This community celebrates the life of Barry, but misses him profoundly too. So how is that next step even possible without the presence of your friend, of your father, of your neighbor? The answer is right here. You do it together. You hug, you laugh, you cry, you tell stories. Amy and Greg were so clear that the emphasis today be on community. Because that is how that next step becomes possible. We support one another. We hold out a hand. We laugh together, cry together, put one foot in front of the other together. That is your final task today, to uphold one another. And how hard it is to put that foot in front of the other, that will ebb and flow. For grief is liminal, not terminal, writes Pastor Jeff Chu. He says, and it need not crowd out other truths, that we have loved and been loved, that we are not alone, that there is still hope in the land of the living. Friends, grief can accompany hope. Grief can accompany joy. Grief always is accompanied by love. Hope exists. Resurrection exists. You are proof of it in the creating of this beautiful community here today, of supporting one another here today. You are proof of that in sharing the love that does not end. Friends, may it continue to be so. Amen.
I'm Barry's son, Greg. Thank you all for coming here today. It's an amazing thing to look out and see so many people who've come here from faraway places and who've been in my dad's life at some point over the past 84 years. And it's especially nice that we've come together at this place, located just a few hundred yards from my childhood home. It's a place my family knows very well, and we've come here for all kinds of important events over the years. And as Amy and I planned for today and discussed what we wanted to say, there was a sense of wanting to fill in some of the gaps of our dad's history that you all may not know about, to say something about who we think he was as a person and also how we experienced him as a dad. You know, when I think about my dad, it doesn't feel like it's such a giant leap to go from the kind of place his small, quiet hometown of Easton, Pennsylvania might have been in the 1940s and 50s to the person and the parent he became. He was an only child to dedicated Lutherans, Mabel and Eugene Pearson. They lived in a modest house with a sprawling backyard that stretched way down to abandoned railroad tracks you could see if you looked hard enough. He spent his early years playing catch and trading baseball cards with kids in the neighborhood, among them a rookie Hank Aaron baseball card, which he fortunately hung on to, and worked a summer job at the Binney and Smith Crayola Crayon Factory located on his street, the same employer as his parents. He was always a good athlete and played many sports. He'd play a sport in college and majored in business administration, then enlisted in the Navy, where when he knew he would be drafted. After a few years in active service, he moved to the DC area and settled into a lengthy career as a civilian in the Navy, during which time he joined the Washington Ski Club, where he met and eventually married a very energetic and extroverted Hill staffer named Connie. They moved into Holland Hills, had 2 kids and a nice yard, although no railroad tracks. Being born in 1941 also makes him a member of the so-called silent generation, wedged between the greatest generation and the baby boomers. I've learned this is a cohort known for cautious conformity, traditionalism, working hard, and not rocking the boat, so to speak. So when I think about my dad, these qualities immediately come to mind. For one thing, he never liked to be complimented. Dad, you once played football in front of 10,000 people at Lafayette College Stadium in the famous Easton High School versus Phillipsburg game? Yeah, but I played the center position on the offensive line, hiking the ball to the quarterback, so I just stared at the ground the whole time. Dad, you had a full scholarship to wrestle at Division I Temple University? Yeah, but I spent a lot of time on my back. I always liked how humble he was, but I also thought it was a little curious he would not accept praise. Something was very steady and reliable about him, too. He ate the same thing for breakfast for years, oatmeal with fruit and Maxwell House coffee. He branched out a little later in his life by combining Raisin Bran with Cheerios. He held the same job with the Department of the Navy for almost 40 years. He'd try his assigned gourmet dinner group meals a week before their debut, sometimes getting stuck if cooking instructions didn't exactly spell out what to do with this or that ingredient. Once he even called Amy at work to ask what the difference was between chopping and dicing. He even made a test drive to my wedding outside Richmond a week in advance, just so he knew the route and wouldn't be late for the big day. What sometimes felt to me like his passionate rule following, I realize now how lucky I was that I could trust he would always be there for me on any big day in my life. My dad liked being physically strong and gently competitive, and there was always a real physicality between us, especially in sports. He tracked my youth league swimming times on graph paper. He came to every soccer game. He even coached me for a week during the 8th grade so I could be prepared for my PE class wrestling match. We'd play catch in our backyard until you had to squint to see the ball at twilight. We'd race between the telephone poles on the street. We'd wrestle on the living room floor until about his mid-70s. We'd see who could hold their breath the longest. We even quizzed each other on trying to name every college and university in Pennsylvania. And so often when we played like this, I got the feeling that whatever it was I was doing, it was fun, okay, and maybe even important to try to keep improving at it. Unsurprisingly, he also did not like to stand out or otherwise be the center of attention. His clothes were not flashy, wearing the same thing for years. While he enjoyed being in the presence of people, he often opted to silently carve the turkey and wash the dishes rather than revel with others at family holiday dinners. He sat in the shade at Holland Hills Pool swim team meets as a ribbon writer instead of taking on more conspicuous volunteer jobs under the sun. He was the most passionate Philadelphia Phillies and Eagles fan I've ever met, yet I didn't know he even liked these teams until I was in college. And after the Eagles won this year's Super Bowl in a blowout, I laughed thinking about how my dad would have been so nervous watching the game until the final whistle, and even then he'd say the Eagles just got lucky. Despite his discomfort with the spotlight, for years he tried to get published in the Washington Post's Style Invitational Humor Wordplay Contest, possibly using a federal government fax machine to send in submissions. It never happened, but his dry, gentle sense of humor, maybe not quite ready for prime time with the Style Invitational, always delighted us. Whenever he would come back from the barber, I would say, "Dad, you got a haircut?" He would always clap back, "No, I got them all cut." Sometimes he would take off his glasses and stare quietly at you with a playful grin, and a moment later you'd realize he was wiggling his ears, something I never learned how to do. What I notice about the qualities I'm highlighting here is that my dad did not easily express himself with words. He also had a kind of stoicism about him, especially with regard to emotions. When he was mad about something, he often would get very quiet and grind his teeth. When he was happy about something, we might see the gleam in his eye, but never too much. When he was proud about something, he might tell others about it, but not always the person of whom he was proud. And when he was sad after his wife and our mom died many years ago, he wore a stiff upper lip, retired, and dove headfirst into the wonderful worlds of birding, travel, volunteering, and a constant supply of yard work. And so for many years, my dad loomed large in my life, but also rested in a somewhat inaccessible place in my mind. Quiet, reliable, humble, kind, playful, stern, unknown, distant, remote, quiet. Indeed, much of my experience of my dad was his quiet, sometimes serious presence. I think all this can make it hard to feel close to someone, to understand them, or to feel understood by them. What feels like our last normal conversation, a few months before he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 5 years ago, involved us sharing a laugh about a line in a movie we had just seen. The line in the movie, spoken and hand-gestured by a famous actor in a very dramatic scene, was, "It's what it is." I cannot say why we both thought this line, and especially its delivery, was so funny, but maybe we both knew something in our lives was, unfortunately, about to change for good. And for that brief moment, we enjoyed some humor as we surrendered to that reality. Indeed, Dad, right after your Alzheimer's diagnosis, you told me you worried what would happen to you, what you might, in essence, lose about yourself. Amy and I worried too. The last 5 years were difficult for you in many ways. Yes, some things indeed were lost. Things like cooking and taking care of yourself got hard, dressing too. Names got hard to remember, faces got a little fuzzy, moving around got less fluid, eating got interesting, and finally talking. Your talking, Dad, went away. But Dad, what also happened to you is you would gain some things too. You saw your children more than you had since they lived with you decades ago. You enjoyed all the routine holiday dinners with family, held your new grandson, and played with your granddaughter, visited your children's homes, took walks down Martha's Road, listened to your beloved classical music, ate good food, attended a Nationals baseball game with your son and a National Symphony Orchestra concert at the Kennedy Center with your daughter. You visited with old friends and even met some new friends, and you spotted birds outside your window, including after you moved out of your home of 52 years. You also would, in fact, meet a whole new community of kind and dedicated people who loved and cared for you and accompanied you every step of the way. At no point, Dad, would you ever be alone again. And at some point in the past 5 years, Dad, you gained something else too. We both did, actually. I realized you, Dad, had also become my friend. I knew this by the way we'd light up when we saw each other. I knew this by how much I enjoyed you, helping you eat or move around your new home or clip your nails or shave your whiskers. I knew this by how tightly you'd hold onto my arm when it was time for me to go. We even got to saying we loved each other, sometimes with words, sometimes without, something for some reason we never previously did. Dad, I came to treasure your soft presence and all those quiet, steadfast qualities that you always had. I could now see that they were the enduring proof that you were still you, and you were there for me, even in your silence, especially in your silence, sweet silence. And no terrible illness could take that away. Thank you, Dad, for being the way you always were. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'm realizing in this moment that I thought I put on waterproof mascara this morning, but it appears to not be the case. So you will excuse any raccoon eyes after this is over. Note for, the future. I'm Barry's daughter, Amy. Greg did a really wonderful job of capturing who our dad was as a person, a father, and a friend. I want to talk a little bit about who I am because he was my dad. When someone you love dies, it's terrible. There's no sugarcoating it. But when you're able to see all of the ways they are a part of you and always will be, it is a tremendous comfort and a gift. Dad taught me to be curious and to enjoy learning. He loved history and frequently asked for presidential biographies for Christmas gifts. His favorite movies were Bridge Over the River Kwai and Tora, 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 both about World War II. Dad also loved nature and science. He was a longtime subscriber to the National Geographic magazine. When he first started getting it, there was an insert in each issue called the GeoGenius quiz or something like that. It was 5 or so questions about geography, often quite obscure. We would come to visit, and he would have already filled out his answers, tallied up his score, and left it on the kitchen table for Greg and I to do. I'm struck by what Greg said about the gentle competitiveness as something that definitely showed up. But we never kept track of our scores. But it was always fun to see what questions were waiting for us when we got there, and there was that playful competitiveness. He had a telescope at home when we were young, and we would look at the stars and constellations out of my parents' second-floor bedroom window. Orion was a frequent character in the southern sky, and I even did a science fair project about him in elementary school. Still today, when I see him in the sky, it takes me back to being a kid looking through that telescope with Dad, thinking about the star formations and the nebula in it, and pondering the mysteries of the universe, I'm sure. One summer when I was about 12, we went on an August camping vacation in Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario, Canada. Dad and I walked up to the beach of a lake one night, and in the absence of ambient light, I saw my first meteor shower. Perseids. I still remember how magical it was. And it always came, it's in August, which was always when we would go on vacation because we were swimming on the swim team all summer. And that's something that comes around again and again, and I always think about Perseids during August. I was lucky enough to come along on the journey of birding at Hunley Meadows over a year or so when he could no longer drive, but before Alzheimer's made the outing too stressful. For Christmas, the last year, he was able to buy gifts. He bought me a copy of Roger Tory Peterson's Field Guide to Birds. As if to formalize this bond we now had. Sharing this experience with Dad showed me part of his life that I would not have otherwise seen and only heard about, but it was consistent with his lifelong love of the natural world something that will always connect me to him. His love of learning and interest in the world transferred to me, and I'm grateful for that. Let me blot some more mascara for a minute. Dad was also a cautious adventurer. He observed first, but often acted, especially in the company of others, and delighted in these new experiences. After college, I studied Spanish in Costa Rica, and my parents came to visit. When our tour van had to pull off the road because a sign, the road ahead had washed out, it was a bit of a drag. But Dad pointed exaggeratedly at a road sign, raised his eyebrows like he did when he was ready to deliver a joke, and asked me, "What does peligro mean?" For those of you who don't know, it means hazard or danger. He knew that, but the unexpected adventure was funny to him, and peligro, danger, became a joke between us for a long time. What does that sign say? In Belize, we organized snorkeling trips, and although he seemed hesitant about going snorkeling to a site called Shark Ray Alley that my mom had picked out, and despite seeing the aforementioned sharks and rays waiting for us when we arrived, Dad was the first one off the boat. He didn't always initiate adventures, but he always was game for anything anyone asked him to do. I have very much inherited this cautious adventurer trait, and I always enjoyed coming home from a trip and sharing my stories with Dad. And I loved hearing his stories when he would visit places I'd never been to on his many trips. Dad also taught us about the importance of community. I've been thinking a lot about that over the past few years. He was engaged in civic association committees in Holland Hills with many of you who are here. He connected deeply with his dinner club, which started in 1993, earlier than 1993. Through aging, illness, death, and other life circumstances, this was a group of friends who showed up for each other and continue to show up for each other. After Dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he was still able to live at home for a while, mostly because of the community around him. He loved to go on long walks, much to the chagrin of the home health aides, who eventually would walk with him and worried that he would get lost. I didn't worry because Dad loved his walks, and I felt calm knowing that so many people in the neighborhood knew him and that he would be safe and he would get home. And for me, that trust was critical. Community is so important, and I'm grateful for all the strong communities Dad was part of and how it impacted my own value of community. I found a screenshot of a beautiful poem on Dad's computer desktop a few years ago. I suspect someone from his birding group or one of his nature trips sent it, and he saved it because it resonated. And because we all know the feeling of looking for comfort when we are mourning, I want to share it with you. Perhaps this is advice that Dad would have given us today. The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars, waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
Would you explain Fur-Elise, your selection of Fur-Elise?
I'm being asked to explain the selection of Fur-Elise. So Greg and I had a little bit of a different memory of this. I think Greg remembers our mom playing it on the piano. I remembered my dad playing it on the piano. But one way or another, it showed up in our household a lot and growing up. So that's why we wanted to have that play. Dad always loved classical music, went with many of you to many concerts of classical music, and we wanted to incorporate that. Thank you.
Thank you. This is your chance to sing along. Oh, did I miss something? This is your chance to sing along. Both of them wanted this song selected, and it's not just my solo, it's ours to share together. Okay, please feel free to sing along. There's an insert inside of your program that has all the words. And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of God, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. You who dwell in the shelter of the Lord, who abide in his shadow for life, say to the Lord, my refuge, my rock, in whom I trust, and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. The snare of the fowler will never capture you, and famine will bring you no fear. Under his wings your refuge, his faithfulness your shield, and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. You need not fear the terror of the night, or the arrow that flies by day. The thousands fall about you, near you it shall not come, and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you ever in the palm of his hand. For to his angels he's given a command to guard you in all of your ways. Upon their hands they will bear you up, lest you dash your foot against the stone. Please sing. And we will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to rise like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand, in the palm of his hand. Thank you so much for joining.
Amen. We will now hear reflections from friends and family, starting with Kate Lynch.
Okay, I can't see anymore. Good thing I brought my own thing. Okay, so I'm Kate Lynch, Barry Pearson, Big B, which is short for Big Bear, okay? That was his nickname from his collegiate wrestling days, but it continued on. He expected us to call him Big B, right? He's not was, he is my sibling-in-law, all right? And the only brother I've ever known. I was 16 when Barry and my sister Connie were married in 1970, which means I knew Barry most of my life. Barry was familiar and comfortable to be around. As most of us know, he was quiet and unassuming, and he was always there for the people he cared about. Okay, I gotta stop now. In many ways, he was like my dad, Neil Lynch, who was also quiet and unassuming, while being there when he was needed. My sister Connie, Barry's wife, was very much like my mother, Marion Lynch. After my parents died when I was in my late 20s, I can't even read anymore. Okay, Connie and Barry were there with me for every life change. My son Sean's birth, my divorce, my household moves. When Amy and Dave were planning to get married in Puerto Rico in 2011, Barry immediately called and told me he was paying for my son, Sean, and I to be there. I'm sure you'll hear from others who knew him at different times of his life. Barry and I shared a passion for photography, and later in life, for birds. Barry bought a Nikon camera. There's a song about that. We were both Nikon users. While he was serving in the Navy, I remember my sister telling me about sitting through a very long slideshow of photography while serving on board Navy ships, okay? All were of ships, okay? Which mainly is what you see when you're at sea, okay? During one of Barry's visits with us in Washington State, which is where I live now, he came out for Sean's high school and college graduations. He stayed at a hotel about 6 miles south of me. I don't know why he didn't stay with me, oh well. I live right above the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge, okay, which is a very large refuge. Barry was staying on the south side of the refuge, which means I didn't see him very often, okay? He made a few solo visits to the refuge to watch birds, okay? During one visit, he bought me a set of cardboard coasters featuring black-cap chickadees, okay? It was very sweet, but I always wondered, why chickadees, okay? He grew up in Pennsylvania, I grew up in New Jersey. Black-capped chickadees were everywhere, okay? In Virginia, you're more likely to see Carolina chickadees, although you see black-capped chickadees here as well. They look very similar. All chickadees are commonly seen and are not threatened like other bird species. Me, on the other hand, I like eagles and hummingbirds, okay? So what I learned from Barry is that all chickadees are not common. I remember how excited he was to see a chestnut-backed chickadee at my front yard feeder. Chestnut-backed chickadees are native to the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, and Canada. He told me it was a lifer. In birder speak, for those that are us that are birders here, a lifer is a bird you're seeing for the first time in your life. After that, I started paying more attention, okay? Especially to the LBBs. Okay, an LBB is a little brown bird. So when you don't know what it is, you call it an LBB, okay? That I still need to identify in my environment. These days, I photograph a lot of birds. I still don't have a decent pair of binoculars. Instead, I photograph with a big honking lens and look up birds later. Birds, especially hummingbirds, bald eagles, and osprey, are the reason I have a 600mm lens. Okay? And Barry's love of birds set me off on that journey. I photographed other things before then. Yep, it's all your fault, Barry. Whenever I see a chickadee, I think of Barry. The photo collage you may have seen on your way in today is of Barry from about 8 years ago that Amy photographed of I took me out of the photo, okay? But I put a bunch of chickadees in there that were from my yard. One was a fledgling nurtured by chickadees nesting on my back patio 2 years ago. So what's so special about chickadees? Well, they're amazingly cute, for starters, okay? Pudgy little bodies that move quick, a sweet call, chickadee-dee-dee, okay? They can be long-lived for such a small bird. They weigh half an ounce and have been known to live for 11 to 12 years. They are monogamous and often mate for life. Sound familiar? Both parents help raise the young. Other birds pay attention to their calls, especially when they're warning about threats from predators. They're curious, especially about humans. So I'd like to wish my brother Barry, okay, brother-in-law, a very happy birthday today. And I'm confident you've now learned to fly. Fly, eagles, fly. I had to throw that in. Just because we're Eagles fans, okay? And they meant to win this last time. Okay. So Barry would be happy to know that today is also Global Big Day. Okay. What is that, you non-birders ask? Okay, it's a worldwide celebration of our feathered friends. Last year, 1.3 million birders celebrated World Migratory Bird Day by observing and recording birds they saw in 24 hours. So guess what we're doing after this? Yeah, okay. Thank you to everyone here for supporting our family, including our family. Holland Hills is a very special place to all of us. And Barry, I'm sending lots of love your way. I know I'll see you again sooner or later. Yeah, water bottle needs to come with me.
My name is Sonia Bloom, and my husband Pete and I were asked to prepare some remarks. I worry now that it's going to be a little bit redundant, not only because there is a consistency to Barry in terms of how he was, but also because Pete and I did not share what we were writing. So bear with us. Barry and I met approximately 47 years ago, around the time our children started Talksmon Preschool. And I know there are many of you sitting here who had the same experience from Talksmon Preschool. From the very beginning, I felt there was something very familiar about him. We were both only children, as you have heard, raised in relatively quiet homes, who sometimes felt flummoxed by the noise and commotion of being in larger families. Barry looked somewhat like my father and had the same demeanor as my father, calm and somewhat reserved. Both had an understated and wry sense of humor, and when interjecting a humorous comment into a conversation, both would pause before a smile spread across their faces, followed by a chuckle or laugh. We also shared a Scandinavian heritage, or so I thought, until many years into our relationship, Barry said, "Sonia, I don't think I have any Swedish ancestry." Nonetheless, I felt a kinship with Barry, and over the years, I referred to him as my brother. So you have another member of the family, Kate. It was comfortable to be with Barry. He was easy to like, easy to be with, easy to make laugh, easy to share stories with, often punctuated by his humor. His modesty, accepting demeanor, his warm welcomes whenever Pete and I would stop by on our walks to invite him to join us for one more round on Martha's Road. And then we would continue to Rebecca Drive, and then sometimes we would continue out Glasgow Road to our home. All of this made it easy to be oneself with Barry. Our families grew up together, adults and children alike, from the early days at Talksmont Preschool until the present. Pete and I and our children, Eric and Linnea, shared family outings, vacations, ski trips with Connie and Barry and Amy and Greg. I am grateful that a close relationship has continued between all of us to the present. I'm also grateful that our connections have continued over 4 generations. I met Connie's parents and Barry's mother, and Connie and Barry knew my parents. We gathered on many Christmas Day afternoons for dessert, but mostly we gathered to play music and sing together. I was at the piano, Connie was on the violin. Barry, Pete, my father, and Pete's father was the chorus. We sang a few Christmas carols, but mostly we sang Irish ballads. Who doesn't love Danny Boy? One time, Barry, Pete, and my father and I went to see a Norwegian movie. My father, Pete, and I thought it was enjoyable and funny. Barry thought it was quite boring and very slow, as Norwegian films tend to be. That should have told me that Barry had no Nordic ancestry. I have a wonderful memory from recent years when we were visiting Barry. Adelina was playing with some train tracks, and there was Barry on the floor playing with her. I joined them on the floor, as Adelina told us both exactly how to build the tracks and where the train should go. Barry, when we strayed, she was quick to correct us. Barry, in a slightly humorous way, became wide-eyed and bowed his head and apologized. Then we kept on building the train tracks in and around all the chair legs and under the sofa while she directed us. The arrival of Adelina and Desmond, as most of you know, was a source of great pleasure and joy for Barry. Ours was a relationship of sharing the ordinary and extraordinary moments in our lives over this 47 years we knew each other. My last words are for Greg and Amy, who labored long and hard during Barry's last years to give him the best quality of life that was possible. You provided all the help you could, and always with great courage, resourcefulness, love, and compassion.
Hi, everybody. I met Barry when Amy and Eric began Talksmont Preschool and when they began playing together about 47 years ago. After Greg and Linnea came along, our families began sharing a lot together. Beach vacations, skiing in Canaan Valley, spending Christmases together singing Christmas carols and Irish favorites, as Sonia played the piano and at Connie's annual St. Patrick's Day parties, we became close friends. Barry had the special gift of making his friends laugh. With me, he was often so subtle that it took a while before I realized he was teasing me. I'd look at him, see him laughing, and then caught on, and I couldn't help but laugh at myself. After Connie's death, such a deep loss for all who loved her, Sonia and I would walk over to see Barry. We'd often find him raking gumballs from the lawn, watching a ball game, or ruminating about how to make a very challenging meal for the dinner group. We'd walk around Martha's Circle and then keep going, often back to our place for a drink or a meal. Barry and I watched football games between the Eagles, as Barry called the Eagles, and the local Burgundy and Gold Club. Once we talked about which sport was the most exhausting and difficult. Barry, from his personal experience, made the strong case that it was wrestling. Barry was very modest and rarely talked with me about important and interesting things he'd done in his life, so that I learned about these kind of things from Amy and Greg. I knew he'd wrestled at Easton High School, but only learned from Amy and Greg that he'd also played football and baseball in high school, and that he'd earned a scholarship and wrestled at Temple. Barry was so happy about Greg and Julia's upcoming wedding. He worked hard on the meaningful toast he'd prepared and delivered it beautifully. I remember Barry and Sonia dancing like they were back in the 60s. I enjoyed watching Barry play with Adelina and Desmond and make funny faces at them. Is Desmond there with Adelina? Oh, okay. But Adelina and Desmond, you made your grandfather so happy. My dear friends, Amy and Greg, during Barry's last difficult years, you attended to his every need and eased the many challenging situations with your constant caring, humor, and love. It touched me deeply to be with you and Barry during Barry's final days and following his death. I will never forget the love you gave to each other and that you gave to your dear dad.
Hello, I'm Dennis Hager, and I'm a shipmate of Barry's. From 1964 on, when I reported aboard the USS Jerome County in San Diego, I was introduced to my new roommate, Mr. I think he was an ensign or Lieutenant JG at the time. And we had we shared a cabin, a stateroom on the ship. I was a brand new ensign right out of officer candidate school, 22 years old. And Barry was my first experience in the Navy. He immediately told me that he had the desired lower bunk and I had the one up underneath the vent, which was about 18 inches. And I'm 6'2", 200 and something pounds. Barry the wrestler was very comfortable down below. I immediately understood, though, that this guy was a great guy, a good guy. He taught me a lot in his very reserved, very quiet, but very effective manner, and made sure I got my rear end out in time to go on watch. While we were on the ship, we deployed together a couple of times. The first time we went to what they called a Middle Pacific or Mid-Pac cruise, and it was to Hawaii, of all places. Well, everybody else was going somewhere else. We got to go to Hawaii for 6 months. And we were on a ship, which was an LST, landing ship tank, which carried vehicles. So we weren't taking any vehicles to Hawaii, so we were able to take our own vehicles. So needless to say, we had a pretty good time when we weren't working in Hawaii. I remember that Barry particularly liked to go out to Makapu Point on the other side of Hawaii, and he would go body surfing with some of the other guys. I wasn't into that, but we had a lot of fun. And then we spent a lot of time in the officers' club playing dice, liar's dice, which, as my wife will tell you, I was never really good at. And spent a lot of time on Liberty together in the club on Waikiki Beach. Great experience. Came back while we were in Hawaii. The rest of our squadron passed us in the night, headed for Vietnam in 1965 when the buildup went on. We didn't join them. We had to go back and pick up some Marines, which we did, and then we sailed for Vietnam. And there was, my next experience with Barry was standing watch with him. Well, I actually started in the first cruise. Because he was about a year senior to me, so he became the officer of the deck, and I was still qualifying as the officer of the deck, so I would stand watches with him as the junior officer of the deck. And he taught me a lot. Most of all, he taught me about the demeanor that was required because of his never being flustered, always being in charge, very quietly, doing all the things that we had to do. It was a great experience, particularly when we spent 32 days going across the Pacific to Vietnam. That's 32 days working watches, 1 and 3 watches. I never got any sleep, and my feet killed me from the meat of the deck. But we got there, we were very busy. I spent 6 months there, and I qualified, but didn't have as much liberty as in Hawaii, but we did get out occasionally. Barry was interesting. He wasn't just a watch officer on the ship. We didn't have, we weren't large enough to have a specialized supply officer. So Barry was a designated, even though he was a watch standing line officer, he was designated a supply officer also. And that was a cause of a considerable amount of humor over time. Because he was a supply officer, he was also a laundry officer. So every time somebody got their uniform screwed up in the laundry or lost their skivvies or their whatever, he would hear from it. Not just the captain, but all of us. And he was also in charge of the galley. And he had to deal with the cooks in the ship, and some of those guys were pretty different, let's just say. And one in particular was sort of like Barry's nemesis. I'll never forget him. His name was Nixon. And we could tell stories from now until day one about Barry and Nixon, because they had an ongoing back and forth, which he always handled with some aplomb. He was very good, but all this gossip. And then there's the most famous story. I'm sure Amy will remember this one. We had, he was responsible for the food that we received on board that we ate. And we, for some reason, there was, we got a large amount of Brussels sprouts frozen Brussels sprouts. And the other member of this is we weren't getting fresh rations at all. And it turned out that Brussels sprouts got served every night in the wardroom. And it turned out that our captain hated Brussels sprouts. So one night, we all went into the wardroom for dinner, and the captain was sitting at the head of the table, and all the officers sat down the side, and they set a place for Barry right next to the captain. And he came in late for whatever reason, and when he came in, his dinner plate was covered with a bowl, upside down bowl. And we sat down, and the captain, let's eat. Barry looks down, pulls up this bowl, and he had an entire plate of Brussels sprouts. The captain said, "Hereafter, we will not have any Brussels sprouts." So that was, we always remembered him for that. We renewed our friendship. Interesting, we both left active duty. I went to graduate school, moved to DC, and met my beautiful bride. And turned out I also reunited with Barry, who was now living in Virginia, not Pennsylvania. And we connected. And in fact, he was in our wedding. He was my best man. Lifelong friends, not just shipmates. And that was a significant event because like some of you neighbors who raised the kids, our daughters met each other ultimately and became lifelong friends too, which I'm very pleased with. We also got to meet Connie, and my wife and I enjoyed her so much. She was a very lovely, outgoing, warm person, and we enjoyed many times we got together with her. I'll not forget that. We, since Barry and I were the closest former shipmates on the ship, we decided to do some reunions, and we had a number of different reunions we got together. One that I remember very well was we all went up to Hershey Park, and that's where our daughters and all of our kids got together, and where a couple of our ship friends, John Lucy, John Levicki, and all their kids showed up, one from Ohio, one from Pennsylvania. It was a great reunion. And we went out to a friendly's restaurant for dinner or something while we were up there. And by previous arrangement, when Barry sat down to dinner, guess what he was served? Brussels sprouts. Years later, I forget what the occasion was, but somebody had fried Brussels sprouts for him. My wife might remember that one. We had other reunions at our house. We live in southern Maryland, and we used to have pig roasts, and Barry and the family would come to those too, and they were great occasions. And then we had reunions there too, and with the two Levickis. And I remember that's when I found out that Barry was into birding, because he came back after one of those reunions and used our canoe, and we went out on the Hunting Creek, which runs off the Patuxent River behind our house, and he did his birding thing back there, which he clearly enjoyed. Let's not forget football. Navy plays Temple. So whenever Navy, and I have season ticket holder at Navy, so whenever they'd play Temple, Barry would always come and go to the game with us. And needless to say, he was rather disappointed on most occasions. One other thing we did that was significant, I did a sort of a history of our ship, and we tried to understand what it had also, it was an old ship, not only served in Vietnam, but it served in World War II. And we found a guy in Arlington who had been a crew member on board that ship. And so Barry and I went over and did an oral interview for the oral history at the Naval Historical Center. Very interesting. The guy had been a postal clerk on the ship during World War II, but was now a judge in Arlington County. So there is hope for all of us. Great guy, great shipmate, great friend, will always be remembered in my heart. So we wish him fair winds and following seas.
We are so grateful for these beautiful remembrances of friends and family. And now we have time for folks to share more. We won't have time for everyone who wants to share, but you can keep talking over the delicious barbecue after the service. So I'll invite folks to come and use this microphone to share more remembrances.
Well, reading the poem was the easy part. Sonia mentioned the word easy several times, and as I was thinking about Barry, the words that came to my mind were easy company. In childhood, one can make good friends because you spend enough time together to really get to know one another. That is a far rarer experience as an adult. Fortunately, in 1982, Ginny and I moved into our Holland Hills house that was just 5 houses away from the house Barry and Connie had moved to 3 years before. That made it easy to get to know Barry, but it was Barry who provided the easy company. He was simply the easiest person to be around I ever met. I didn't get to know Barry well early on because Connie had such a big personality that she often consumed most of the space in social gatherings. Also, much of the time, Barry worked in Pennsylvania. Our paths crossed often at the Holland Hills Pools Meets for kids, Holland Hills 4th of July picnics, and at Sunday morning volleyball games on the pool playground. After Connie died in 2003, Barry retired. Shortly thereafter, I was asked to help the pool out of a difficult financial situation. As I was working pretty hard at the time, I thought the best thing I could do would be to recruit Barry to be pool president. I knew he cared deeply about the community and had the skill and the temperament for the job. I also thought it might be a way to help him through a trying time. Barry always thought about things carefully. He agreed to accept the job on one condition. The condition was that I serve as vice president. That was the start of a 20-year friendship and also the start of 20 years on my part on the pool board, which Barry left after 4. West Potomac High School football games, high school and college wrestling matches that took us as far away as Hershey, Pennsylvania, movies and dinners, walks around Martha's Circle, barbecue. Oh boy, did Barry love barbecue, as did I. And just sitting at Barry's living room, talking, laughing, watching birds. These are the everyday things on which we build a strong, loving friendship. It was always rewarding. It was always easy. I miss him greatly. Deaths like Barry's suffered are not only brutal for the individual, but they take a huge toll on the caregivers. I want to commend Amy and Greg for the extraordinary effort and amount of time they spent making sure that Barry had everything possible. Most of all, the love you can only give to a parent who loved you so deeply.
My name is Stuart Davis, and along with my wife Pam, I was a good friend of Barry's at Huntley Meadows for many years, starting in the early 2000s. And he was, for those of you who are not familiar with Huntley Meadows, it's a beautiful park, Alexandria. No, I take that back. It's Fairfax County, even though it has one of those strange Alexandria post offices. It's Fairfax County Park. And every Monday morning, rain or shine, regardless of the weather, Barry and Pam and I and others would gather for a couple of hours of birding, and then we would adjourn to the nearby Denny's for a very social gourmet breakfast that we all enjoyed. And his friends have recently contributed to Huntley Meadow in Barry's honor. And I just got back yesterday from the engraver this little plaque which says Barry Pearson, 1941 to 2025. He loved Huntley Meadows with affection and fond memories from his Monday morning friends. And this will be put on a larger plaque that will be in the visitor center. So I hope some of you will go in and look for it as our little tribute to Barry. Also, one of Barry's friends, Pax, put together this little book called Walking Alone, and it has a series of recollections from various Monday morning birders of their connection to Huntley Meadows. And in it is a very beautiful piece that Barry contributed, because at this point, of course, Barry was not able to do it himself. But let me just read you the first paragraph from it. When my dad Barry was approaching retirement, my mother confided in me. She planned to continue working, and she was getting worried. Your father needs to find a hobby. Otherwise, he's going to drive me crazy. Luckily, that hobby found him. I wish I knew exactly when it started, but friends in the neighborhood encouraged him to come with them to the Huntley Meadows Monday morning boardwalk. In addition to providing him with a new hobby, it provided a new social network as well as some post-retirement structure. Unfortunately, soon after he retired, my mom passed away after a long journey with cancer. But that made his birding hobby and social connections even more important. And Barry really was such an important part of our group. We all loved him, and we miss him a great deal.
Friends, we've got time for one more, and then we'll share more over dinner. Lunch.
Hi, I'm Dan Weinberg, part of the dinner group that has met since the late 80s, about once a month. So we got to know Connie and Barry very well, and Barry, after Connie passed, was able to step into the cook role, which he had been avoiding. But Amy coached him well, and he would practice and practice and do a good job. But the more important reason is to tell you the story of why we're having barbecue for lunch. You heard from Peter that it was his favorite food. Sue and I, my wife, have a house on the Outer Banks, and once it got built, we decided we would invite this dinner group to come down one weekend every winter. And on the way, there's this place called Pearson's Pit Barbecue. I only now realize why he loved it so much. It was because the original sign maker spelled pit with 2 T's. And so it must have appealed to his Pennsylvania roots. And the owner, Pierce, couldn't afford, JD is his name, he couldn't afford to have another sign made. So it's just that way even now. Barry loved this barbecue so much, he would want to stop there every time he would go down and drive back. And he had the job, part of the job of driving Joanne Hirsch to these dinners. Joanne was the kind of person who, if would try to halve or quarter the amount of butter in any recipe she was assigned. So she didn't much like this barbecue, but Barry, as unassuming and as friendly as he was, he needed his barbecue and he would stop. And he loved it so much that after he had stopped going to these and they had to stay at home, we would bring him Pearson's barbecue, put it in the freezer, and he could always have it for dinner sometime. And so we have barbecue as a lunch today, as part in memory. It's a fond memory of Barry. Thank you all. I'll thank for them. Thank you for coming.
What a joy to hear these beautiful memories and that we can continue sharing memories over lunch. Friends, let us close in prayer. God of many names, Spirit of life, of death, and yes, of resurrection, be with your people. Let all gathered today feel your never-ending presence and assure us, God, of the reality and the healing power of love. We lift up all gathered here who love Barry, who called him family, who called him friend, who called him grandpa, who called him dad. Let our sad hearts be sad when they need. Let them hold space for all the multitude of feelings that they need. God, hold our tender, full hearts. As we grieve, as we remember, we thank you for the gift of Barry's life, for his quiet humor, for his community-driven hobbies, for his parenting, grandparenting, for his friendship. We are grateful, Spirit, for the ties that bind, that connect us to Barry. We thank you that this love remains and carries us forward. God, we ask that you give all gathered here the strength to live out that love, to notice the beauty that Barry noticed, to try out new things as Barry did, to invite someone new into their group as he was invited, and to say yes when asked as he did. God, let our yes carry us forward. Let it connect us to community, and let it be said with the love that opens doors and gives us strength to walk through them. God, we pray this in your many names. Amen. Friends, we get to continue sharing, being community as you share lunch in the commons outside the chapel. Share lunch, share stories, share the love. May it be so.
If you please remain seated, I'll dismiss you by rows. We'd ask the family go in first, and if you would, please go all the way into the commons so we don't bottleneck the door. We'll get everybody to lunch faster. And please enjoy Ria's music.